Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for our Parenting Through Cancer webinar in partnership with Count Me In and Bright Spot Network. My name is Zach Getty, and I am the Education Manager here at Fight CRC. Fight Colorectal Cancer is the leading patient empowerment and advocacy organization in the United States, providing balanced and objective information on colon and rectal cancer research, treatment, and policy. We are relentless champions of hope, focused on funding promising, high-impact research endeavors while equipping advocates to influence legislation and policy for the collective good. Before we get started with our actual presentation today, I do have a couple of housekeeping items I want to go through, so bear with me while we do that. We will have some dedicated time at the end of the webinar for general questions. Please feel free to use the Q&A panel on the right side of your screen to ask any questions that come up along the way. This event, like all of our webinars, is meant to educate as well as serve as a forum for you to ask your questions and start conversations, so please don't be shy. We will do our best to address any and all questions that are asked at the end of the webinar. So I won't stop the presentation to ask questions as we go through it, but put them in when you think of them. We'll get to them at the end of the webinar. We will have a recording of this webinar available on our site within the next few days. You will receive that direct link via email as soon as it is available if you've registered for this webinar. We will also provide a transcript of the webinar on our site for those of you that would prefer to read the information discussed today, as well as a copy of the presentation slides. Feel free to tweet along with us. You can use the hashtag CRCwebinar. Please remember to stop by our website, fightcrc.org, to check out all of our patient and caregiver resources. We offer a variety of free-to-use online tools, such as our clinical trial finder, which provides a curated list of colorectal cancer-specific clinical trials, the patient provider finder, which allows you to search for providers in your area with experience and expertise in treating colorectal cancer, Chat CRC, our one-of-a-kind interactive tool that can answer your questions about colorectal cancer and related topics. That's available on our site or by text at 1-318-242-8272, which is Chat CRC. There's also our free Community of Champions app, where you can connect with other people in the colorectal cancer space and keep in touch with Fight Colorectal Cancer and know what we're up to. We also offer an assortment of print and digital educational resources that are all free to request or download from our site. Quick disclaimer. The information and services provided by Fight Colorectal Cancer are for general informational purposes only. The information and services are not intended to be substitutes for professional medical advice, diagnoses, or treatment. If you're ill or you suspect you're ill, please see a doctor immediately. And in an emergency, as always, call 911 or go to the nearest emergency room. Fight Colorectal Cancer never recommends or endorses any specific physicians, products, or treatments for any condition. Okay. With all of that out of the way, I'd like to briefly introduce our panelists. Today, joining us is Carissa Hodgson, Director of Programs and Community Outreach at Bright Spot Network, who has prepared a presentation for us that we will get into shortly. And we also have Melissa Myrick, Partnership Manager for Advocacy Groups from Count Me In. And she, before we get into the presentation, is going to give us a brief overview of Count Me In and what that program entails. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, give Melissa just a second, and then I'll let Carissa introduce herself and get into her presentation.
Thanks, Zach. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm so excited to be here and to hear Carissa's presentation. Count Me In is a patient-partnered research organization, and we're based out of the Broad Institute in Massachusetts. We are currently enrolling participants for our colorectal cancer project, and if you're interested in enrolling, you can do so by going to joincountmein.org. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you for joining us today. Carissa, I'm going to hand it off to you. I'll let you introduce yourself a little more thoroughly, and you can share your screen now.
Sounds great. So excited to be here. As Zach said, if you wouldn't mind just holding your questions till the end, happy to leave time to answer any questions you have. But for now, let's dig in. So I am the Director of Programs and Community Outreach at Bright Spot Network. I have been serving families facing cancer for about 16 years now. So prior to my role here at Bright Spot, I was the program manager of the Children, Teen, and Family programs at Gilda's Club Madison. I have sat as the Youth, Families, and Cancer Special Interest Group co-chair for the Association of Oncology Social Workers since 2018. And I also do teach at the Sandra Rosenbaum School of Social Work here at the University of Madison, Wisconsin. I got into this work because my father died of lung cancer when I was 7, and then my stepfather died of liver cancer when I was in my 20s. So while I didn't start out with the professional identity of doing oncology social work, it became my life's passion, and I really enjoy the work I do. So I come into this work with the lens of an adult child who had a parent with cancer. The need is really there to support parents who are navigating cancer diagnosis while also parenting young children. We've seen the rates of cancer rise among adults ages 30 to 39. And because of people often having children even later in life, we're seeing more and more kids having a parent with cancer. So currently, 1 in 5 newly diagnosed cancer patients have a child 18 or younger, which equates to about 3 million kids and teens who currently have a parent with cancer. We know that cancer affects the whole family. It is a systemic disease. So just like this mobile here, if you pull on one of those little pieces, it's going to shift the whole mobile. So cancer doesn't just happen to the patient. It certainly affects their partner, their kids, their whole family system. And we know that a child's well-being is directly related to the well-being of their parents. So we really need to be supporting parents with cancer in order to be helping the entire family system, especially its youngest members. This research study is over 20 years old now, but still very poignant, which compared pediatric cancer patients to the children who had a parent with cancer. And researchers found that it was the children who had a parent with cancer who experienced greater distress than kids who had cancer themselves. And they were, I think, a little surprised by that. And the findings really showed that the reason that kids with a cancer diagnosis had less distress is there was no hiding it. Like they were in on every procedure. They were the ones being poked and prodded. They understood what was happening. Whereas so many parents who get a cancer diagnosis, especially if they have very young children, they, with good intentions, try to protect their kids. And by doing so, they might keep information from kids. They might even lie to kids, not tell them what's happening. And the thing about kids, and you probably know them if you're on this webinar, is that they have incredible imaginations. So if they're not told the truth, they will fill in the gaps with their imagination. And usually what they make up in their mind is far scarier than the truth. And so that tends to be our guiding principle in supporting parents is that we really want to be as open and honest as possible. Of course, being developmentally appropriate and meeting kids where they're at, and kids are very unique and different. But in general, we want to give them the information they need so that they can feel more empowered and more confident to go through the experience of cancer in their family. A little bit about Brightspot and how we got here. Our co-founder and executive director, Haley Pollack, was diagnosed with stage 3C colon cancer after the birth of her second child. And when she was looking for resources, there really weren't any. There were some great resources for kids 6 and up, so for school-age kids, but for parents with babies and toddlers, preschoolers, there was really nothing. And she was trying to find information about how to wean before she was ready, how to deal with, lifting restrictions, how to talk to a 2-year-old about cancer. And while people in her life were saying they're too young, they don't understand, they won't remember, that just didn't sit right with her. And she knew intuitively that's not what she needed. That's not what her kids needed. And luckily, she had a social worker that was able to connect her to another parent of young children who was just diagnosed with cancer. And together, they created Bright Spot Network. What we are a community of parents with cancer, and we create connections and provide tools to help parents parent through a cancer diagnosis. Everything that we provide is free. There's never any cost to our programs. We are completely virtual. We serve parents all over the United States, not only the parent with cancer, but partners as well. We have many different programs to help parents feel confident in getting through this, including free books about cancer, because we know that's usually one of the best ways to have tough conversations is to use children's books. We have free art boxes to create points of connection for parents and kids, financial grants, many different support groups for parents in active treatment, for parents post-treatment, for partners. We have groups for parents with a stage 4 diagnosis, meetups for parents of color, for couples. So if you go to our website, you'll find many different support groups to help connect you with other people who get it. Because so often that's really the hard part, is that sense of isolation when if you're parenting through this, you hopefully have your parent friends who understand how to get through temper tantrums and other things related to kids. And then you have, your chemo buddies that understand side effects, but you don't have that overlap. You don't have other parents who know how difficult that is to juggle all of that at the same time. Just no one gets it. Even your best family and friends don't quite understand what you're going through. So being able to connect with other people who really do get it is invaluable. We also provide navigation services, connections for kids to connect with other kids and learn coping skills. We do webinars, have workshops, and have a wealth of web resources like guides and videos and blogs, coloring sheets, all on our website. So I encourage you to go check that out, whether it's for yourself or someone you care about. Please share the resources to help parents get what they need. So when kids have a parent with cancer, you can sort of boil down their needs into, I believe, these 3 points, which is they first need safe, reliable, and empathic caregivers. They need predictable routines and preparation for changes. And they need open, honest, and developmentally appropriate communication. So many parents, as I said before, really want to protect their kids. Understandably, I'm a parent, I get it. But as Dr. Harpham says, the greatest gift you can give your children is not protection from change, loss, pain, or stress, but the confidence and tools to cope and grow with all that life has to offer them. And so, well, of course, no one wants a cancer diagnosis. In my 16 years doing this, as I talk to parents, they most often will say, while this has been terrible and this has been hard and this has really created a growth opportunity for me and my kids, and it's not what I wanted, I can see how my kids have grown more mature and they've learned some new emotional vocabulary and they've been able to actually do more independent skills than I thought that they could do. Like I had no idea they could actually get dressed on their own. I had no idea they could make themselves a snack. I guess I was kind of sheltering them. And I guess in that way, this is one of those silver linings. So there are those opportunities for families. I'm always letting parents know that they have a unique expertise on their kids. So while you show up to webinars like this and you read books, you look at guides, of course that there are some great experts out there that can shed some light on new information. You should always take that in through your own parental filter and kind of let it sit with your own gut and see what makes the most sense for my kids and my family, because every family is different. And even if you're a parent of multiple children, you know that each of your children are very different, and the way you talk to them and support them might look very different. You might not have all the answers to their questions, and that's okay. But your presence, your attention, and your willingness to talk is the most important. So at the bottom line is just show up. That's what your kids will respond to the most. It's okay to say, I don't know. That's a great question. Let me send a message to my doctor. Let me figure that out. But just the fact that you're checking in with them and giving them some undivided attention, even if that's only 10 minutes a day, if that's all you have the energy for, that's what they will care about. And lastly, honesty really is the best policy. That doesn't mean you tell them everything. There's a big difference between being honest and letting them in on every detail. But ultimately, you want your kids to trust you. You want your kids, especially if they're of school age, you want them to come to you before they go to Google. You want them to know that you will give them the accurate, relevant information. So by and large, we're trying to make sure our kids really understand that we will always be honest with them. Regarding safe, reliable, empathetic caregivers, there are often some immediate concerns when a parent has cancer. And that might look like, putting together a care team, especially if you're going to be gone for treatment, especially if it's a, long distance, if you're going to be leaving them for some amount of time. You're wanting to put together a care team that is as small intimate, consistent as possible, especially when you have young children. We're trying to minimize their disruption because ultimately we need them to feel safe. All kids need to feel safe, seen, soothed, and secured. It can be a very difficult time with young children, especially if they're in stranger danger, or again, if you're in the middle of really forming that initial attachment with an infant. Yeah, it can be a really crummy time to disrupt that. So as much as possible, we're trying to minimize any of that disruption and have a group of caregivers that we feel really good about and that our children feel safe and good about. Long-term planning is a tricky one, and I know a lot of parents just don't want to even broach this. And they feel like by talking about, creating a will or putting together an advance directive, that somehow invites unlucky dark magic or something that means that then that they're going to die. And I know this can be scary. I know it can be hard, and I don't want to invalidate how tough it is. And so many parents, in fact, pretty much every parent I've talked to that has actually put this together and done it will say, that's such a relief. That is a monkey off my back. Like now knowing that there is a plan in place helps me to let go of some worries I didn't even realize were under the surface. And it helps me to be more present. I will say that after my dad died, it was just me and my mom, single mom, and I was having panic attacks and some real anxiety about what would happen if she died. But of course, I had one parent die. My worries are going to go to know what's going to happen if you die. And that's expected for kids is to worry about, their other parent. And the fact that she sat me down and she talked through all the options and she was very transparent about let's talk about the pros and cons of different aunts and uncles and people you would live with, involving me in that process and letting me know that there was a plan brought my anxiety way down. And I stopped having those panic attacks. So for me, that was everything I needed. Now, not every child should be involved in that process. And I get that. For me, that's what worked. And this is why I always tell parents to listen to their gut. But I want to underscore the value of having a plan. And when you can truly tell your kid, don't worry, no matter what happens, you will be loved and cared for. There is a plan. That can be enough to just bring some of those worries way down. In creating that support team, as a parent, you're often having to create sort of different circles of support, especially with young children, like we talked about on that last slide. You're creating a pretty small inner circle of likely family members or close friends who are going to be coming in and out to help care for kids when you're not there. But they're going to be really focused on the intimate caregiving. You could really use extra help as well, right? So having more of an outer circle that might include neighbors, coworkers, people who say, "How can I help?" Giving them jobs that aren't as intimate, more like, "I would love for you to make me meals, do my grocery shopping, take my dog for a walk," whatever it is. Sort of delegate those other tasks that create a lot of stress and take up space on your plate. You're having to prioritize, right? You have very limited energy, and ideally, most of that you have is going to go directly to your kids. So figure out what tasks you can delegate, what goes to that inner circle, what goes to that outer circle. If you're lucky enough to have someone in your life that you can designate as the team lead, so that again, you're not even having to manage any of this, that's even better. A lot of people use platforms like Caring Bridge, lots of helping hands, My Lifeline. There's so many really, really good ones out there. If you can tell your best friend, I am nominating you as my team lead. If you could write all the updates, you could take care of the schedule. That's what I need you to do. Again, another thing off your plate to help free up some of that energy. Don't forget about the importance of peer connection. So not only for yourself, it's important to feel like you're not isolated, but for older kids in particular, like school-age kids that are out in the world, they might be feeling kind of alone themselves, and they might not know any other kid who has a mom or dad with cancer. If you can get them involved in some type of peer support group, if that's a local cancer support group, amazing. Otherwise, it might be Kesem, or it might be Pickles, it might be some other virtual space where they can be with other kids who have a parent with cancer. That is invaluable. That really shows them that they're not the only ones and that it's okay. It is okay for them to, feel what they need to feel. For kids who have a mom with cancer, hair loss tends to just be a really hard change. And if they see other bald moms, That's so validating for them. So of course we can always do that through books and videos, but to just like real life see, even if it's on a screen, it's very powerful. And ideally, we want to have points of connection with kids every day. When their life is feeling a little bit out of control, a little bit tumultuous, they need that sort of like grounding moment, even if it's only 5 or 10 minutes. Ideally, it's completely led by them, whatever they want to do, however they want to play, interact, talk. You're just allowing them to lead it. You're just showing up, right? That's going to show them that you're there, even though you're going through this really hard time. You can still show up and be there. For young kids in particular, that physical touch is huge, that oxytocin, not only for the kid, but for you. It's really important. So if you have lifting restrictions, if you can't hold your baby, if you can't really like, especially for when kids get bigger in those like toddler times, you might not be able to lift them up anymore. And that's hard for them. It's very confusing. They don't understand, why can dad not pick me up anymore? So find creative ways to lie next to each other and snuggle, to maybe do foot massages. Do something where you're still in proximity and touching and having that healthy touch, even though it might look a little bit different. And we might have to remind our young kids often, that, I have my scar, or I have my surgery, I have my owie. I can't pick you up right now. Let's do this instead. So if you're giving them an alternative, hopefully they will catch on quickly, that there's sort of a new routine around that. It's important to maintain expectations and rules. I hear from parents all the time, God, I can't have one more thing to worry about. I'm just kind of throwing it all out the window. I get where that comes from. And while flexibility is really important when you go through a cancer diagnosis, kids tend to thrive on routine and expectations. And older kids, I've had them tell me, God, I really worried once mom stopped worrying about my grades and worrying about, me making my bed and doing my chores at home. When she stopped caring is when I started worrying, because I know how important those things are to her. So I kind of started to think things must be really bad if she doesn't care about those things anymore. So I do think that these are important. They might look different. Of course, you are going to let some of those things go. Yeah, kids are going to have more screen time. They'll eat a little more sugar, whatever. Those things are okay. It's okay to be flexible. But in general, we want to still kind of maintain some sense of structure for kids. Any way we can give our kids to process big feelings, give it to them. Remember that kids don't really process the way adults tend to, talking. That's face-to-face talking isn't really ideal. Young kids in particular work out their questions and their feelings through play. So giving kids lots of time to play. You might want to join in their play. Time for creativity, for art, music, movement, mindfulness activities, books. There's so many different ways to interact with kids and to really, again, help them work out many of those big feelings. Another thing that really helps kids, a huge tool, is some kind of schedule. The owner of Mighty and Bright, the founder, Sarah Olsher, who is fantastic and has written some great books. One thing she said once that has really stuck with me is just imagine as an adult losing, your phone or wherever you keep your calendar and not having that for just a week, and how disorienting that would be, and not knowing what was happening next, what appointments were coming up, where you were supposed to be tomorrow. That's very unsettling. And for kids, while they're of course not as structured as we are as adults, they really thrive on knowing sort of what to expect. And if you can give them a very simple calendar, and for kids that can't read, giving them pictorial, stickers, buttons, magnets to know when grandma's going to be caring for them, what day mom's going to be in treatment. Maybe you add things like little pictures of mom is in bed because after treatment, we know that she's going to be in bed for 3 days. Whatever, events or themes are important for your family and your kid, create pictures for them and put it up on a schedule, just 1 week at a time. That will help a child to know what to expect and help bring down some of that anxiety. If you're anticipating a pretty big change, a physical one in particular, if you know you're going to be losing your hair, you know there's going to be an amputation, you know you're going to be coming home with an ostomy bag. These are things that you're going to want to give your kids some preparation for. It doesn't have to be a huge heads up, even just a few days. That's, like maybe like a 3-day window to say, Have your coloring sheet ready, your book ready, whatever it is, to say, hey, there's something I want to tell you about. After dad comes home from the hospital, he's going to have this special bag. Let me tell you about it. Let me give you a coloring sheet about it. And that will give them a concept of sort of what to, okay, start thinking about. They can ask some of those questions and gives them just so much agency in having dad come home and not being so scared or startled by this new thing that's coming into the house. We want to be open and honest as much as we can with our kids. I find as adults, and I do this all the time, I'm guilty of this, we talk a lot. We fill in silence. And as much as possible, we want to edit down what we're saying into very short, very simple phrases, especially if we're dealing with kids 0 to 5. We can expand as they start to grasp what we're talking about. Then we can start to say more, but start out super simple. I sort of recommend parents even just like write out what they're thinking and then take a red pen to it and start crossing out all the extraneous verbiage. Keep it simple. Make sure you talk about words that your child will overhear. So the word cancer, chemotherapy, radiation, immunotherapy, whatever it is, make sure you're using those words and explaining it to your children. There's some really great kid-friendly glossaries out on the internet that you can use that can take some of these complicated themes and words and break it down into very simple words. This is where you use children's books. Can't say that enough. These are really helpful in addressing a lot of the questions kids would have naturally. They're woven into these books. And then kids can not only hear the words, they can see pictures, and they can start to put this all together, along with the feelings that are very common. In general, I tell parents to avoid metaphors, especially with kids 0 to 5, because they're very concrete thinkers. So if you're talking about the monster in your belly, that might be incredibly scary for a kid because of those imaginations, like they're magical thinkers, they might actually think of a monster, and that might lead to even bigger fears. So if you can use real words and give power to that, and you get to control the narrative and explain it, that's better. You might want to think about rehearsing what you're going to say, that role playing it if you want. Do have these conversations at a time you know that your kid tends to do the best. So if you know that after school is a bad time because your kid's sort of like debriefing from the day, that's probably not the best time. It's probably not the best time to have this big conversation right before bed, even though that's probably when your kid is going to ask you big questions because that's how kids work. But in general, try and think about having those harder conversations at a time when your kid has had fluids, it has a full belly, is rested, and can sort of focus for the next 5 to 10 minutes. The last one is just, this is a big one for me because I hear this all the time. I hear parents all the time say, and I promise I'm going to get better, or, and I promise I'm not going to die. I know where that comes from, and I get it. Those are false promises. Um, as humans, we're all going to die. And so I would just encourage you to please never promise your child that you're not going to die, because right there, we're just laying a foundation of them not trusting us. And like I said earlier, the most important thing you want to do is reinforce that trust that kids can come to you and you'll be honest with them. These are some examples of super shortened sentences. Mommy has cancer. She's going to the doctor to get better. She's getting a medicine called chemotherapy. Medicine may make mommy feel sick and tired. You can hug and snuggle mommy all you want, and you will never catch cancer. Nothing you did or said caused mommy to get cancer. You can always ask questions about cancer or how mommy feels. The 4 C's of cancer, these are usually the issues that kids kind of come back to the most. They want to know, can I catch it? Did I cause it? Can I cure it? And who will take care of me? These are the areas that you're going to circle back to all the time. This is not a one and done conversation. So, number one, cancer is not your fault. Nothing you did or said caused someone to get cancer. Sometimes I think this one feels silly, especially if you have kids who are, old, like 8, 9, 10. You're like, well, of course they don't think that they caused it. I have talked to adults in their 20s and 30s who have told me, listen, I know that this isn't real, but I can't help but wonder, I had this really big falling out with my mom or dad, and then the next day they got cancer, and like, ooh, like, did I cause that? So like at some level, we're all magical thinkers, and we try to make these connections. So you can't tell your kid enough, nothing you did caused the cancer. It's not your fault. Cancer is not contagious. Try to avoid using words like sick in talking about cancer because I think that, again, reinforces the idea that it's similar to cold, flu, COVID, especially if you're immunocompromised and wearing a mask. It gets very confusing. So you want to be very clear that, cancer is not contagious. You can come snuggle me. We can still be together. You're not going to catch my cancer. It is not your job to make me feel better. That's another one. It is okay for kids to be helpers. In fact, that can be really empowering to give kids small, simple tasks like, oh, if you could bring me a cup of water, that'd be great. Oh, if you could put some snuggly socks on my feet, I would love that. Those are great. But in general, you want to remind them their job is to be a kid, and all of their hugs and kisses are what make you feel better. And that's why you have this great medical team. Their job is to give you the medicine and make you feel better. Kids are very egocentric. That is developmentally on par. That's right where they're supposed to be. Everything relates to them and how it affects them. So this is why they're going to ask lots of questions about how things affect them. And that's why I talked earlier about saying no matter what happens, you'll be loved and cared for. There is a plan. You'll always have someone to pick you up from school, to make you your lunch, take you to soccer practice. We're going to make sure that you're taken care of. And remind them that no matter what questions they have, they can come to you and ask. Say, I'm sure right now, sounds like right now you understand what's going on. If you have a question at any time, please ask me. If I don't know, I'll tell you I don't know, and I'll see if I can find out the information. Um, Another thing similar to this is it's also very helpful to check in on what your kids do understand. And a great way to do that is after you have some of these conversations, it might just be choosing a time a few days later to say, to just check in with them and ask, like, I just wanted to see what you were thinking, about what we talked about. Tell me what you understood about what I told you, and have them explain back what they heard, because often what a child hears is very different than what you told them. And that's just for all human beings. So it's never a bad idea to kind of check their understanding so that you can correct misunderstandings or expand in areas that maybe they are a little bit confused. All kids are different. Even if you have identical twins, I bet that they process information very differently. So keep that in mind. There's no one right way to do this. Figure out what works for your kids, try out different things. It is okay to be emotional. I have so many parents ask me, like, is it okay if I cry in front of my kids? Of course it is. Um, it's a great way to teach kids about emotions and feeling emotions, what emotions look like, and then what you're going to do with that emotion. So it's okay to say, I'm tearing up right now because I'm just feeling a little sad. And it's okay to feel sad, and it would be okay if you feel sad. Of course, we never want to completely break down in front of our kids. This is why we hopefully have supportive people in our life that we can go have all of our big feels with when we're feeling out of control, or if we have to step away for a minute to really have a tantrum or bawl our eyes out, that's okay. You can do that privately. But yes, showing a little frustration, showing some sadness, showing a little bit of worry, give name to that so that your kids can start learning that emotional vocabulary and using it themselves. That's really great parenting. We talked about timing, trying to consider that when having big conversations. This is not a huge one, but for some people, it's trying to listen to underlying messages, especially if you have a kid that keeps asking you the same question. It might be that you aren't understanding them, and they keep coming back because the way that you're explaining it is not resonating. I know that there was a story once about a child that kept asking his mom, "Are you going to be there for my band concert next month?" And she kind of kept saying, "Well, yeah, it's on the calendar. It's on the calendar." And then she realized that what he meant was, "Are you still going to be alive next month for my band concert?" And so sometimes your kids just either don't know how to quite articulate a question, or they don't even know themselves that that's what they're asking. But again, this is where you as parents are the experts. You know your kids. I know you do. And so sometimes it's using that gut to go, I think this is what they mean. Expect the unexpected, of course. I mean, if you're a parent, you're already an expert in this. So your kids are going to ask you questions at like the worst time, when you're feeling the worst, when you're trying to go to bed. Or on the flip side, I have so many parents anticipate that their kid is going to just totally fall apart when they hear this information and then they tell their kid and their kid's like, okay, cool. Can I go play now? So you never know. You never know how your kids are going to take information, how they're going to process it. So be expected for that. How to handle school if your kid is in daycare or is going to school. It's pretty important to let at least someone there know what's going on. Number one, it's great to know that there are extra eyes out, like keeping an eye out for your kid. They're there for a large part of their day, and you don't know how they're behaving and what's going on there. So it's helpful to, tell a teacher, tell a school social worker, a school nurse, just say, I have cancer. Just want you to know that I'm going through treatment. If you would just kind of keep an eye out for my kid, let me know if there's anything I need to worry about. It's nice to have that. They might be able to work with your kid to just give extra passes to come talk to the guidance counselor, or maybe even make some adjustments during the day. Give them a little extra support. That's always a good thing. If you are doing this as a single parent, or if you're divorced or separated, as much as possible, you're wanting consistent messages. You want kind of parents on the same page and being able to support the kids through what they're feeling, and doing that as a unified front. I know that that's not always easy and there could be complications, and this might be when you're trying to pull in that support team to help navigate some of the challenges. Talking about death and dying typically comes up. I had parents ask me about this all the time. I understand that I am a grief person. I teach a graduate course on grief and death and dying. So this is my area, and I realize I'm more comfortable with it than most people. I wish that as a culture we would just talk more about death and dying as a natural part of life. If you feel comfortable as a parent just starting to integrate conversations, if your kid is asking, I would say, great, you can just talk about what your values are around death and dying, what you think happens. If your kid has questions, there's so many great books out there. Use children's books. I would say try not to shy away from it. If that means that you need to get some extra support from a therapist or a spiritual advisor or whoever is going to be kind of that resource for you so that you can feel okay having those conversations and feel centered having those, then do that. But a lot of kids actually do really well talking about what it means to die. If you have an advanced stage cancer and you're trying to navigate, like, when do I tell my kids? In my experience, a lot of parents want to wait to talk about end of life until there are some real physical changes that show that you are starting to actively die. Because for most kids, they just want to kind of be present, live their life, and it's okay, even if you have a stage 4 cancer, to not, I mean, it doesn't need to be front and center, right? Like if your kids are saying, I think about this, like, yeah, that makes sense. I think about this too. But I know, like, right today, I'm here. And today, I want to be playing this board game with you. Like, right now, I'm wanting to be watching this movie with you. And we'll let the doctors do everything they can to make me live as long as possible and keep me comfortable as long as possible. And I'll let you know if anything changes. And then if it gets to the point where you're in bed every day, you can no longer really engage, those are cues your kids are picking up on. Things are changing. Mom, dad isn't quite the same. That's when usually parents start to have those conversations about, it looks like, I am going to die of this cancer. It's going to be sooner than later. And that's when you might pull in extra support to have those conversations. I have so many parents that get worried about telling people about cancer because they say, like, I don't need other people talking to my kid about my cancer. I'm very private. That makes sense to me. I get that. In this day and age, when information is everywhere, I also do like to caution parents and say, you might be telling a select few people about your cancer. And I don't know how much you trust them, but information does get out. And I just want you to consider what it would look like if you haven't told your kid about your cancer and they happen to find out at school from a well-intentioned parent of a friend that said, oh my gosh, I just heard about your mom. How is she? Think about that, right? Because this is an opportunity to create your own narrative. For young kids, I can almost guarantee that if they go to school and they say, my mom has cancer, someone in class will say, my cat had cancer and they died. My grandpa had cancer and they died. Every little kid has a pet or a grandparent that died of cancer, and parents are terrified of this happening to their young kids. And they're like, my cancer's treatable. I'm going to be fine. I don't need every little kid telling my child about all the people who died of cancer. I get that. I understand that concern. And kind of have to think about like the flip side. So the flip side is not having them know at all. So instead, I would say, how can we prepare our children to hear that information? So, hey, at school, you might have people talking about their pets or grandparents who died of cancer, and that can happen. But I just want you to know that my cancer was caught early. I'm getting really good treatment, and I plan on living a long time and being around for a long time. These are never one and done conversations. Wash, rinse, repeat. So you're managing a lot, right? And I just really love this quote from Barbara Coloroso, which is, life is not fair. Life hurts. Life is good. These three seemingly incompatible expressions are really three parts of the whole of living. They are threads woven through the tapestry each one of us creates as the visible expression of our being a part of humanity. To accept these three is not to abandon hope or optimism, or to deny our real grief. To accept them is to rid ourselves of the unnecessary suffering that comes from struggling against these three truths and trying to make them something they are not. The last thing I want to touch on before I open it up to questions is distress. Like, how do you know if your kids need extra help? I love this Shel Silverstein poem because it's all about kids trying to make us smile. And my goodness, if you're a parent, you know that kids, like, they often are always there to like brighten our day. And while that's such a sweet aspect of childhood, we also don't want them feeling like it's their responsibility to make us better. So I'm always telling parents, like, again, you know your kid the best. You know when they're off. And it's okay for kids to be off for a week or two. But if this is persisting and you're like, ugh, like they're just not really, they're not the same, they're not quite functioning, that's maybe when you want to reach out for some extra help. So particularly for kids 0 to 5, if there are disturbances in the big four, so a big regression in development, in school, in sleep or eating, potty behaviors, um, those can be a sign that some extra support would be helpful. And again, that doesn't mean anything is wrong. It just means, gosh, my kid is really trying to deal with a big change and they could use some extra support right now. Same thing if your kid is all of a sudden really exploding all the time, or they've gone really inward and they're just quiet and withdrawing all the time. If you have a kid that feels like it's their job to be a parent, a surrogate partner, a caregiver, like they're not allowing themselves to be a kid, they're trying to take control of the situation. Again, you want to help them to know that their job is to be a kid, and you want to connect them to someone who can help them be a kid. If you're going to pursue therapy, try to look for someone that understands family systems, definitely has worked with kids before. Ideally, they understand cancer or chronic illness. And because kids tend not to do talk therapy, look for someone that uses play therapy, art therapy. If you had a kiddo that experienced something traumatic, maybe you fainted or they had to call 911, find someone that uses EMDR to help them with that traumatic memory. Don't forget about all the other support out there. It doesn't have to be a therapist. It could be support at school, a social worker, counselor, nurse, teacher, coach. Schools, again, can be a hub of support services. That most schools have support services. So could your child be going to talk to the counselor once a week? That might be a beautiful built-in support right at school. At the hospital, are there social workers that could help? Is there a child life department where they could work with your kids? Are you connected with a spiritual center? So many great camps for kids. Kesem is amazing. And they don't only do summer camps, but they do year-round programs to keep kids connected. Are there other local families? Maybe there aren't even, you didn't even know, but you might be able to get in touch with other local families through like your hospital social worker or through your school, through teacher. You might be able to sort of sign a release and get in touch with other families. Do you have any kind of local in-person support groups at any kind of cancer support community? Or at least then online, can you get connected through Bright Spot, through Wonders and Worries, through Pickles? There's some really great support networks out there. And just lastly, circling back to those silver linings, which I know is kind of a trigger word there, but what I had real families tell me is that it really did offer an opportunity for their family to grow. Parents told me it taught their kids how to be more empathetic, how to be self-reliant and confident. As a family, they learned how to connect and appreciate one another, how to prioritize, and how to again, just really find those special moments that prior to cancer they might have taken for granted. And to end with a favorite Maya Angelou quote, and I'm going to switch out people for kids here, and that kids will forget what you said, kids will forget what you did, but kids will never forget how you made them feel. So remember, you're going to make mistakes. You're a parent, you're human. And that is okay. You'll say the wrong thing. You'll go up and make a fix up. That's fine. But what's most important is that you're showing up, that you're checking in with your kids, that you're spending some time with them. That's what they will remember is that you were paying attention to them. So I'm going to stop sharing right now and open it up to any questions.
Thank you, Carissa. I just want to say it's amazing and difficult and needed work that you are doing with Bright Spot Network. So I think it's really amazing. I want to thank you for taking the time to join us today, go over the slides, and offer like actual practical, actionable advice. I think that can be hard to find sometimes. So I do want to open it up for questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the Q&A panel. Uh, while we wait, though, I think just a couple of observations or things that stuck out to me during your presentation was you said kids make up situations that are worse than the truth and the importance of being honest with them. And I think I don't really have so much a question about that, but just an observation of what an incredible, like, it's true. Like, I remember being a kid and thinking, automatically assuming the worst about any given situation if I didn't know any better. I think it's hard to remember what it's like to be a kid and that they handle things differently than adults. They're not just little adults.
They aren't right. I know, right? Their brains do work differently. And it's so helpful to try and keep that front and center, right? As we're trying to have these very adult big conversations, which is why I always say that's why books are great, is because they've kind of done your job for you. So especially as you're introducing the idea to them or trying to talk about the questions and the feelings, if you have the book right there, you can take some of the pressure off yourself and be like, I'm just going to read the text that's in front of me, and it's just this beautiful way to have these tough conversations because often you're like snuggled up with your kid. It's something you're going to do with them anyway. It's a great way to talk about some of these really big concepts.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask if there were any specific books that you would recommend about this topic or that you have found useful in the past, or just what to look for if somebody is out there looking for written material to kind of help start this conversation with their children.
Definitely. Our most probably requested book from parents is Cancer Hate Kisses. And I think why parents like that book is it really reinforces that idea that like you can't catch it and your only job is to love me. And like my doctors will take care of me. And um, I think that kind of very positive, lovely message resonates for a lot of parents. As far as more of an informational book, I really like Someone I Love Has Cancer by Sarah Olsher because I think that it addresses some of the like the educational piece about what is cancer and what is different cancer treatment, while also talking about the feelings that are normal that kids might have. That skews a little bit older. I think for kids that are super intellectual, cognitive processors, there's a book out there. I have a question about cancer that was written for kids who are neurodivergent, but we have so many parents request it that just have kids that don't really need like the pictures and the story. They just have questions and want really clear answers. So I recommend that book. For families that are navigating separation, Invisible String is really helpful because it reinforces that relationship that, like, no matter where I go or if I'm going to be gone for treatment, even if it's just for a day, like, we're still connected. I'm always here. Our love is always there. It takes kind of like this abstract topic and then a theme that's very common for young kids, which is separation anxiety. And it gives them a tool to kind of go like, and kids might then make like a touchstone about that or something physical that helps remind them that no matter where you go, especially now that things are extra scary, like I'm going to hold your love with me no matter where I go. And that can be really helpful.
Thank you so much. We did have a question come in. I will read it off here. My daughter, age 5, has started having some more intense emotions and attachment to me. How can my husband and I better understand what is developmentally normal for her age versus a reaction to my cancer? We have been very open and honest with her and want to make sure we are meeting her needs. Thank you.
So I'm going to start by just saying you clearly are doing everything you need to do. The fact that you notice that and you ask the question means you're being an incredible parent. period. There's like almost no way to suss out what is cancer related and what would be normal, right? Because unfortunately, you're being put in this position of you can't. Like it's all happening at the same time. So what she would naturally be expressing at this age, even if you didn't have cancer, who's to know? We don't know. So we can only work with what's being given. So I think just continuing to pay attention to what she's worried about, her concerns, what she's bringing up, and just attending to what's in front of you, keeping it focused on, the behaviors and what she's expressing, giving her, number one, space to talk about it, then two, validating it and saying what you're feeling makes sense. It's okay to feel that way. It is normal to feel that way. And then three, giving her some tools to work through some of those feelings is everything that she needs. If you feel like the tools that you're giving her or the space to talk doesn't feel like it's quite enough. Again, I don't think it's never a bad idea to connect kids with extra support. So maybe it is about finding a therapist, or maybe it is about connecting her with a cancer support group just to talk about it with other kids. There are so many different avenues at coming at this, and sometimes parents just can't give kids what they're looking for because maybe they need it from another kid their age, or they need it from an adult outside of the family. So that says nothing about your ability to be an amazing parent. It just means they might need someone else to address this with them as well. And I'm gonna make sure that my email is in the chat. So if anyone has any questions, in addition, they can always email me offline.
Thank you so much for
Yeah.
sharing that. All right, if everyone can see that in the chat, be sure to make note of it. It will stay up in there as long as the webinar is still running. So please copy paste it if you'd like to reach out to Carissa afterwards. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to pop them in there. We got a couple minutes left. I wanted to touch on something else that you mentioned in regards to the importance of being honest and ensuring that your children come to you as opposed to Google. I think that's something that we stress so much for adults
Right.
that, Dr. Google is not your doctor and is not a good place for it's good for some things, but it's not a good place to be, figuring out what a diagnosis means. How do you ensure, or at least make sure your children know that you can come to me for honest answers and this kind of stuff, as opposed to, they're going to explore, they're curious, they're going to find answers anywhere, but being that preferred source of information first and foremost. Any recommended tips? I know that's kind of a big, tough question, but
But it's a good one. No, I like to always circle back, even just as a parent, to go, like, what can I control and what can't I control? Because when I think we get too caught up in like, how can I fix this, control this, manage this, we're actually kind of wasting our energy. We want to sort of big picture it. So if our kids are old enough that they're going out into the world without us, so really if they're like 5 and above and they're going out to school even, right? And they're talking to other kids, other adults. They have access to a computer that we might not be watching and seeing what they're doing. The best thing we can do is teach them how to handle those situations when we're not around. And so then it's like educating them how to do these things. So hopefully at an early age, if they're going to be on a computer anyway, we're teaching them how to safely scroll through the internet, how to engage, right? So hopefully some of that is just part of our parenting anyway. Messaging, like giving them information about what sites tend to be reputable, especially now we're talking like middle school, high schoolers, right? So teaching them about like, .edu and .org and some, places that tend to have more reputable information, and how to double check and source check, and giving them some of those tools so that they can start to learn for themselves, how can I trust information that I'm finding online? Those are all great, great ways to teach kids. In general, I tell parents, it can be really helpful to tell kids that while it is, again, especially if you can't control what they're doing, just say, I would really love for you to come to me first with questions. Of course, you can go online, but that's really just sort of a conglomeration of information from all patients. And I'm a very unique individual, and I'm going to have the most accurate, relevant information for what's happening to me. So I wouldn't want you to go out there and find information that actually has nothing to do with like my type of cancer, my treatment. So come to me with those questions. And then if the two of us together want to go on and search more, I'd be happy to do that. And then that might be a great invitation that you can do that with them and kind of almost start to just check, like, how are they searching? Get some insight, learn a little bit about how they search the web, and then can you provide some coaching and skills and make it almost a learning opportunity?
Thank you so much. I just want to thank you again for, having such an informative presentation about such a difficult topic to talk about. So thank you so much. I think this has been really informative. I don't have any more open questions right now. I am going to start wrapping it up. We've got about a minute left or so. So if anyone wants to get one last one in there before we close, I would encourage you to do so. But if you would like to get involved with Fight Colorectal Cancer, there's a variety of ways that you can do so. You can join us, join our Resource Champions program, help us distribute resources to clinics, health fairs, people who need them. You can join us for in-person events such as our Call on Congress event, which is coming up. And what you see behind me is our United in Blue installation, where we install 27,000 flags on the National Mall. We will be doing that again this year. We will be in Washington, D.C. in early March. Feel free to look it up on our website, register and join us. You can also register for Climb to a Cure or other events that we run. You can apply to be a RAT, which is our research advocacy training and support group. You can apply to our ambassador program. You can request resources to distribute for awareness at health fairs or other events, and you can reach out to us directly for other volunteer opportunities. So I'd like to encourage anyone who's looking to get involved in the colorectal cancer space to please reach out and do that. I do want to take another moment to thank Carissa and Melissa for joining us today and for their respective organizations, Count Me In and Bright Spot Network, for supporting this webinar and working with us in partnership. We could not have put this on without either of you. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us today for an hour in the afternoon to talk about this very admittedly important topic. So I hope we got to at least one person that will take this information and use it moving forward. So thank you so much for taking the time. We really appreciate it. And then I see somebody has raised their hand. I cannot bring you on camera or take you off mute. So if you have a question that you can type out real quick in the Q&A program or a Q&A panel, please do so. Or if you need to, you can reach out to Carissa and her email address that she's put in the chat, or I am putting mine in the chat as well. Please feel free to reach out if you do not manage to get that in before in the next minute or so. I do like to end these with our mission statement. We are Fight Colorectal Cancer. We fight to cure colorectal cancer and serve as relentless champions of hope for all affected by this disease through informed patient support, impactful policy change, and breakthrough research endeavors. Again, Melissa, Carissa, thank you so very much. We really appreciate your time. This has been a great presentation. Thank you.